What's the worst thing TV inspired you to do? Did you try any dangerous WWE stunts as a child? Did you get a terrible haircut to be like one of your favorite characters? No matter what poorly thought out idea you had, it is nothing compared to these people. The killers on our list took inspiration from the worst of pop culture and went on to commit crimes almost too shocking. From terrifying massacres to a crime that shocked the state, here are the killers inspired by TV. Mario Padilla and Samuel Ramirez. It's impossible to talk about the slasher genre without mentioning the Scream franchise. With its iconic ghost face mask and plot twists, the movies have inspired countless Halloween costumes, several sequels, and, tragically, real-life violence. In 1998, two teenagers, 16-year-old Mario Padilla and 14-year-old Samuel Ramirez, took their obsession with the films to a horrifying level. Mario lived in Linwood, California, with his mother, Gina, stepfather, and baby sister. His cousin Samuel was a frequent visitor to their home. On the surface, the family seemed relatively ordinary. Gina just welcomed the new baby, and life appeared stable. But for Mario, tension was building. Like many teenagers, he struggled with his relationship with his mother. He felt stifled by her constant demands, especially when it came to chores. Resentment began to simmer, and over time, this teenage frustration took a dangerous turn. For weeks, Mario and Samuel stewed in their resentment, letting their frustrations fester. As they watched the Scream movies, something inside them began to shift. The masked killers on screen didn't just carry out brutal murders. They did it with precision, planning every step. What began as angry conversations quickly escalated into a full-fledged murder plot. Inspired by the calculated violence in the Scream films, the boys imagined themselves as real-life versions of Ghostface, even considering buying masks and voice changers to complete the fantasy. Though they abandoned those theatrics, what they carried out was far more terrifying. A real-life act of violence that would shock everyone around them. On January 13th, 1998, the day that Mario and Samuel had planned finally arrived. They tried to recruit a third boy to join them, but he backed out. Undeterred, the cousins pressed forward with their terrifying plot. That day, inside the family's home, they attacked Gina Castillo in a manner that echoed the violent scenes from the movies. Samuel held her down while Mario, her own son, stabbed her repeatedly. The attack was savage, using multiple knives in a frenzy. Despite being gravely injured, Gina managed to dial 911 in a desperate attempt to survive. In her final moments, she identified her son as the attacker, a heartbreaking detail that underscored the horrific nature of the crime. As police arrived at the scene, Gina had already succumbed to her wounds. The brutality of the attack shocked the community. What made it even more disturbing was that Mario and Samuel didn't intend to stop there. Their plan also involved killing Mario's stepfather, but he hadn't come home for lunch that day, which ultimately saved his life. And the boys had sent threatening letters to two local girls, plotting to harm them as part of their escalating violence. Thankfully, their arrests prevented these further tragedies. Mario and Samuel were taken into custody and charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. During the investigation and subsequent trials, one question loomed large. What role did the Scream films play in the boys' actions? Prosecutors argued that the Scream movies played a significant role in the shaping of the boys' actions, with their growing obsession blurring the line between fiction and reality. The teens allegedly referred to their plot as doing a Scream, and had watched the films multiple times in the lead-up to the crime, becoming fixated on reenacting the violence they saw on screen. However, the court wanted to avoid sensationalizing the case. The judge ruled that no mention of the Scream movies could be made in court, and the trial was not to be referred to as the Scream murder case. Both defendants were tried as adults due to the severity of their crime. Mario was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Samuel, being younger, was given a 45-year sentence. Even though Mario's case seemed settled, it wasn't over. In 2022, the California Supreme Court ruled they would receive a new hearing in juvenile court, given his age at the time of the crime, considering factors such as his maturity and the possibility of rehabilitation. This development could lead to a significant reduction in the sentence, though it remains to be seen how the court will ultimately rule. Randy Stair. In the 2000s, Nickelodeon aired a series of iconic shows that many still remember fondly today, including Danny Phantom. The animated series followed the adventures of a boy who, after an accident, became part ghost and battled supernatural entities. But for Randy Stair, a 24-year-old from Dallas, Pennsylvania, this harmless cartoon became something much darker. His obsession with one of the characters spiraled out of control, leading to a horrifying act of violence that shocked everyone who knew him. By 2017, Randy Stair appeared to lead an ordinary life with a stable job at a local supermarket. However, beneath the surface, he struggled with deep isolation, social disconnection, and a worsening mental health crisis. Randy became fixated on Ember McLean, a character from Danny Phantom. In his mind, she was more than just a cartoon villain. She became an obsession, someone he referred to as his queen. Randy wasn't just admiring a fictional character. He claimed that Ember was calling him to join her in the afterlife, and he was determined to answer that call. Randy's obsession with the cartoon wasn't just a private fixation. He poured his energy into creating content for his YouTube channel, which featured an animated series called Ember's Ghost Squad. In these videos, characters from a world inspired by Danny Phantom engaged in extreme violence. Randy's obsession with this dark narrative grew to the point where he hired a voiceover artist to help bring his disturbing vision to life. One of his most unsettling creations was titled The Westboro High Incident, a grim foreshadowing of his future actions. Randy's increasingly troubling thoughts were evident in his posts, revealing a growing admiration for individuals responsible for violent tragedies, and his content became progressively darker. On June 5th, 2017, 2 days before the incident, he posted, "I am so ready to die. 2 more full nights, and that's it. I've officially accepted that Wednesday night will be the death of me." As Randy's fixation on violent themes in his alternate persona, Andrew Blaze, intensified, so did his preparations for a catastrophic event. Before the massacre, Randy made sure to put his affairs in order. He sent messages to those he worked with on his YouTube channel, letting them know he would soon be dead. He thanked his voiceover artist for her contributions and made several uploads, including videos, journals, and photos. His final messages painted a clear picture of a man whose mental health had deteriorated to the point of no return. He had spent years struggling with his identity, once claiming to be a female ghost named Andrew Blaze, trapped in a male body. But now, he was fixated on death and destruction. On the night of June 7th, 2017, Randy arrived at Waste Market after closing time, as he normally would. But this time, he wasn't there to work. Armed with 2 pistol-grip shotguns, he blocked the exits with heavy objects, trapping his co-workers inside. Randy opened fire on his unsuspecting colleagues, killing 3 of them in quick succession. 63-year-old Terry Sterling, 25-year-old Victoria Brong, and 47-year-old Brian Hayes were all shot and killed within minutes. The attacker also attempted to shoot at propane tanks, hoping to cause an explosion. As chaos erupted, one of the workers managed to escape and call the police. But by the time authorities arrived, it was too late. Randy had already turned the gun on himself. The aftermath of the shooting revealed even more disturbing details. An autopsy showed that the killer had ingested a significant amount of diphenhydramine. It was clear that his mental state had been deteriorating for some time. One of the people Randy had worked with on his YouTube videos, voice actress Laura Faverty, later recalled how she had missed his final message because her phone battery had died. By the time she saw it, the news were already everywhere. Randy's mother, too, received a text message from him shortly before the attack, but she had been asleep at the time. The enormity of what he had done was difficult to comprehend. Stefano Brizzi. Breaking Bad is one of the most iconic TV shows of all time, telling the story of Walter White, a high school teacher who transforms into a ruthless meth kingpin. His cunning rise to power and his brutal methods fascinated millions. But for Stefano Brizzi, it was more than just entertainment. His obsession with the show, and its dark methods, would escalate over time. Stefano, an Italian man living in London, didn't seem like someone destined to commit murder. The 51-year-old had degrees in philosophy and web design and had worked a high-paying job as a web developer. But he found himself trapped in crystal meth addiction. As Stefano's behavior became increasingly erratic, he developed an interest in BDSM, erotic asphyxiation, and even Satanism. His life quickly unraveled, and so did his grip on reality. People who knew him from support groups later said Stefano was obsessed with Breaking Bad. and it was that obsession that would inspire him to commit a crime that would shock the world. In April 2016, he used the popular gay dating app Grindr to find his victim, Gordon Semple, a 59-year-old police officer who had served over 30 years on the force. What was meant to be a casual meetup for sex and drugs quickly became something far more sinister. Stefano, already in a bad mood after being stood up by a previous date and consuming a lot of drugs, didn't find Gordon attractive when he arrived. But despite his disappointment, the 51-year-old pressed on, and what followed was a descent into horror. At some point during their encounter, Stefano strangled Gordon to death. He later claimed it was an accident, an erotic game gone wrong. Gordon's tragic death marked a dark turning point in the events that followed. Instead of seeking help, Stefano made a chilling choice to conceal the crime, taking inspiration from Walter White's infamous methods in Breaking Bad. In one episode, Walter White disposes of a body by dissolving it in acid, and Stefano followed suit. He dismembered Gordon's body, dissolving parts in an acid bath and cooking others. Disturbingly, later that same night, another man from Grindr tried to visit, but Stefano turned him away, calmly stating, "We're having a situation here. Someone fell ill, but we're taking care of it, so our party is cancelled." But Stefano's grisly plan quickly began to fall apart. Hiding a decomposing body in an apartment building was impossible. Neighbors complained about a foul odor, and eventually, Gordon's partner, Gary Meeks, reported him missing after trying to call him 20 times without a response. When police arrived at Stefano's apartment on April 7, 2016, they found a scene straight out of a nightmare. In the oven, they found fat and grease from where Stefano had cooked parts of Gordon's body. More remains were found in the bathtub. When confronted, Stefano initially tried to blame the devil for his actions. But it wasn't long before he started confessing, especially when the evidence of cannibalism surfaced. In court, Stefano tried to downplay the accusations of cannibalism. He claimed he didn't remember eating Gordon's flesh. But this defense fell apart quickly. An odontologist examined the evidence and found traces of human flesh in Stefano's teeth. A bite mark was found on Gordon's rib, and more of his flesh was found on chopsticks. In the end, a jury found Stefano Brizzi guilty of murder, returning a verdict of 10-2. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 24 years behind bars, plus an additional 7 years for obstructing the coroner. But Stefano wouldn't serve out his full sentence. He had been placed on watch, with corrections concerned he would take his life. But in a tragic failure of the system, he was removed from watch just a month into his sentence. In February 2017, only 2 months later, Stefano was found hanged in his prison cell. On his bed was a will and several letters to loved ones. In one of the letters, Stefano wrote, "I die in peace." Before you go, I'd love to know if you like having multiple stories in one video. Let me know in the comments down below. And if there are any cases you'd like for me to cover, you can email them to me using the address on my channel. Thank you.